gonna look back, cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast, and that's facts. Only I can make a change, slowly take a step today. I will never be the same, cause that's what it takes.
A snowy and icy winter, almost like none other in the Reno area, as we welcome you into vlog 203. In my last 13 sessions, I've booked 12 wins. I think vlog 201 would stand as the lone loss. It's been unbelievable after a rocky first month and a half of this year. I think it's safe to say that I'm back.
We are back, baby. We are fucking back. We are back. Classic. We are back.
Let's go. Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it.
Amazingly, the game was already full before 11 a.m. on this Thursday morning, so I'd have a brief wait. But after about 25 minutes, I would get a seat on table 1, buying in for $1,000 in this 0-5-10 winner straddle rock game. First hand I'd play would be one in which I'd bust a guy. I'd raise ace-9 over 2 limps, and they'd both call. I'd get a 9-high flop, and when I bet it, a short stack jammed all in for his last 110, and after the board ran out, he simply said that he had nothing. The legendary Mr. Z straddles from the hijack, and I have aces under the gun and make it 30. MP1 calls, and the straddle defends. So with 95 in, the flop comes out 7, 8, 9, 2 clubs, and I bet 60. MP1 folds, but Mr. Z ain't going anywhere yet. So with 215 in, we get a turn that comes in offsuit 3, just like I was hoping for. I bet 125, hoping he continues to draw at a flush or a straight, but he chooses not to, showing the typical straddle hand of 6 deuce and throwing it into the muck. The showdown between Mr. Z and I, with one of us having pocket aces, would be something that we'd see again later on this day. I then raised pocket 9s to 75 and lost that money when I got called by 10-8 offsuit, and despite it getting checked all the way down, I would lose to a rivered 10. The low jack straddles, and under the gun +1 makes the call. I have ace-5 of spades in the cutoff here. Given what I know about these players, they probably have no interest in folding to a raise from me here too often with the $15 straddle on. And do I really want to play a bloated pot with ace-5? I wasn't sure, but decided to just call. So with 45 in, the board comes out king 10-4 2 spades, giving me the nut flush draw. +1 checks, and the straddle bets out for 25. I haven't had a lot of success semi-bluffing these kind of nut draws over the years, and spoiler alert, I wouldn't have had any luck with it had I done it here. So I call, as does +1 with 120 in. The turn is an offsuit queen, and now it gets checked to me. Now, I talk about the fact that I wasn't going to semi-bluff, and this runs contradictory to what I just said, but given the fact that no one showed any interest here, I figured with the nut flush draw and now it got shot, I've got to give this a shot. So I decide to bet a stack of reds, and +1 throws his hand away, but the low jack thinks about it for a minute and makes the call. So with 320 in, the river is another 10, so I brick out. And now, as I'm contemplating whether or not a bluff might work, he decides to just fire out into me betting 300. Now, I can't see, obviously, how I can call with ace-high here, but I just couldn't figure out what the hell hand he was going to be showing. It just seemed really weird. Ultimately, I decided to fold this hand, and he showed 10-4 offsuit for a rivered boat. Surprising turn check, I guess, but the river bet obviously wasn't as weird as I initially thought. It actually made perfect sense, given what he had. I'd then get a very late start filming on the biggest hand of the day so far. I would overlimp king 8 of spades, and I'd flop the nut flush. I'd bet it small and get 2 calls before the ace paired on the turn. Fortunately, no one was full, and even more fortunately, I was up against the queen-high flush, and I won that player's entire $600 stack as a result. I then noticed that my Vegas Golden Knights made a phenomenal move. If it was 2017, this year it's purely a result of a ton of goalie injuries. I then had visions of a big pot when I was cruising down the street in my 6-4. I'd flop a flush draw on queen 8 deuce 2 clubs, and then after check calling a bet, the ace of clubs hit the turn. I let out, and after some deliberation, my opponent got away from a pair of queens. We then get a $60 raise from the hijack, and I have pocket queens in the cutoff. This should definitely be a raise, but based on this really odd sizing and wanting to keep one other player in the hand, I decided to kind of gamble here and just call. Unfortunately, nobody else comes in, so with 135 in, we're heads up to a board that comes out 6-6-3-2 clubs, and once again, he bets 60. Once again, I was in a spot where I probably should have raised, but I didn't. I decided to just call, and with 255 in, the turn is an offsuit king, and for the third time now, he bets 60. So, the last card in the deck I really want to see, but now he's making this tiny bet relative to the size of the pot, so I don't see how I can fold for that price. And with 375 in, the river pairs the king, so a good card for me, making it that much less likely that he has a king, and this time he does not bet 60. He chooses to up the bet to the incredibly high amount of 75. So, given the fact that I got that great river card, for me, my hand's obviously under-repped, I decided to snap call this $75 bet, creating a $525 pot, which I was pretty confident that I was going to be winning. But I wasn't, as he shows ace-king. There are some hands on this vlog that might go on the highlight reel. That was not one of them. This is a mid-session update. Look, I love the wolf in Pulp Fiction.
You sending the wolf?
If I had that shirt that says the Wolf's Cleaners, 30 minutes away, be there in 10, I would wear that shirt if I had one. But are we sure the wolf really did all that much? I mean, he pretty much just showed up and said, why don't you guys clean this shit up? Am I missing something? This was a mid-session update, and it's now over. Over the next hour, I'd lose 4 more small pots, and 4 hours into the session, I'd lost back all but 200 of my winnings on the day. I would then raise ace-jack and flop an ace before getting raised by a gentleman who had the perfect image to bluff me off top pair. I just have to hope that he wasn't doing it there. And then for the first time in a while, I'd get in a hand against the most aggressive player in our game, the aforementioned Mr. Z. He'd raise to 75 from MP1 and the straddle would fold. I have 40% of a royal flush here in the cutoff and decide to give him action. So with 165 in, the flop is 9-9-10, 1 heart. He bets 100 here, and with top pair and backdoor draws, you better believe I'm coming along. So with 365 in, the turn comes to 7 of hearts. And now he bets out for 250. Chances are dramatically decreasing that a 10 is going to be good here. But it is still possible given what I know about this opponent. And with the draw, I'm certainly going to be calling this bet. So with 865 in, the river is a beautiful deuce of hearts, and now he decides to check. So I've made the backdoor flush. I have 650 left in my stack, and I really felt that he was going to fold a lot of his overpairs, and obviously probably all of his 10s if I decide to bet it all here. A 10 certainly could be in his range, so I decide that I want to increase the range on which he will pay me off on this river, so I decide to just bet $350 here. And he clearly doesn't love the idea of paying me off, because he thought about it for about a minute or so, but ultimately says that he's got a call, creating a $1,565 pot. I show my hand and win against pocket aces. Are you aware that you become kind of a fan fave?
Oh, have I now?
Yeah. So basically,
Can't imagine why.
the desire is for more of you on the vlog,
More of me.
and I guess less of me.
Oh dear. Well, I guess I can oblige.
All right, try to behave yourself, will you?
I never do.
How about this next hand? Middle position 1 makes it 35. I am in the hijack with ace-king, and I make it 90. The cutoff straddle decides to cold call that 90. And then a gentleman on the button, who is the tightest player in the game, makes it 260. Original raiser MP1 thinks about it for a minute before jamming all in for $5,000. I obviously fold ace-king here, the cutoff folds, and the button calls off the rest of his stack. We have an aces against king's cooler, and they run it twice, and aces do indeed hold. Kind of funny to see that kind of cooler on a hand on which I had one of each. Under the gun races to 35, and MP1 calls. I'm in the button straddle and defend with 6-7 of spades. So with 110 in, the board comes out queen 8-5 with 1 spade and 2 hearts. Under the gun bets 45, and MP1 calls. With my open-ended straight draw, I'm certainly going to be coming along as well here. So with 245 in, the turn is the 10 of diamonds, and now it gets checked to me. Operating under similar logic that I had in the last hand where I took a similar line, I figured this was worth a shot to take this pot down with a semi-bluff. So I opted to bet 125 here. Under the gun thinks for a second, and calls with the other player folding. So with 495 in, the river comes a beautiful 4 of spades, giving me the straight, and he decides to check. All I was thinking about was how I probably could have gotten more money on the hand in which I'd rivered the flush 2 hours prior. And that resulted in me doing something that I try and never do in spots like this, and that is betting too much for value. There's almost exactly $500 in the pot, and I decide to slide in a hockey puck announcing a $500 wager. Certainly my hope was that he would think that I busted out on hearts and now I'm trying to buy this pot, but he barely takes more than 10 seconds with this one and decides to muck, if I had to guess. And again, as I talked about before, I know this player well. I would imagine he didn't even have a very good queen in this spot. He could have had a hand like queen jack potentially, but I would imagine that's the best he could have had given the speed of his river fold. I did give him $200 back shortly after that when I flopped a jack high flush draw, but he bet full pot on the turn, and I opted to relinquish partially due to being worried about being up against the nut flush draw, a possibility based upon past betting patterns.
All right. It's a local favorite, JB.
You want me to get on the GG right now?
Well, I just wanted people to know that this is the man I called out for playing on the wrong app.
That's right.
And he said not only has he gotten on the right app, but take a look at his screen name. I'm putting it on the screen right now. That's why this man is a legend.
Put that hand I raised with on the screen too and let him know. Let him know.
Well,
I said Reno, baby.
With you, that's pretty much any hand.
I said Reno, baby, and I pushed it in.
Nice. All right. Local favorite, JB, ladies and gentlemen.
I then opened the 10-8 of diamonds, which is somewhat similar to a hand that Garrett Adelstein played on Hustler Casino Live last year. Now, I only mentioned that because I proceeded to get 3-bet by a pro on my right who showed the Robbie. And then my final hand of the day came when I 3-bet squeezed King Queen of clubs from the button, and 2 players gave me action, which actually came as a surprise. It checked all the way down to the river. I hit a queen, and despite an ace being out there, I got $100 in thin value when I sized down, targeting pocket pairs. Just like that, I found myself 7.5 hours into a shift of poker and decided to rack up and book the win. All right, cashing out, booking a win of $962. Kind of feels like I should have won more than that. The hand where I should have value bet more on the river, I didn't bet enough. The hand where I apparently should have bet less, I bet too much, though I do kind of still like the sizing that I made there on principle because of the fact that it often looks much more bluffy when the front door flush draws don't come in and then you kind of blast the river. I felt like that was a spot where I was going to be able to try to represent a missed flush draw, but he must not had all that much because he didn't really even give it any consideration and folded when I bet that 500. Either way, we've been on a heater, and it looks like we're still on one. All right, let's get a question of the week in here. This one involves something that is the opposite of what is going on right now. And I'll tell you about that as soon as I remind you about our friends at questlifepoker.com. You can get 25% off a basic, premium, or elite subscription. And that 25% off is good for the rest of your life. If you use the link in the description below, it's the best place that you're going to find on the internet when it comes to live poker training. Most training sites over the years have been focused on online poker, but if you're like me, you prefer to do it live. And Crush Live Poker is, without a doubt, the best place to go when it comes to strategies that will actually work in games like you and I play in. They've also added some new quizzes on that website, which I have actually found very helpful as well. So I'd recommend you guys checking those out as well. But as far as the question of the week, it comes from Andrew, and he writes in, what is your biggest downswing in terms of number of buy-ins? The one that really stands out was in 2012. And it was the summer of 2012, and my bankroll was obviously not nearly what it is now. And that was when I went on my first ever $10,000 downswing. And I certainly remember how mentally devastating it was. I remember actually Mike Nelson, he realized what was going on. He actually came up to me and he said, Ben, I know this isn't going to help, but I've been running just as bad as you and I feel your pain type thing. And he proceeded to perhaps snap out of that downswing by later that year becoming the manager of the poker room, which is probably a much better and lucrative technique than the one I utilized, which was just to kind of grind it out. But I remember mid-2012, that downswing is going on 10,000 down in the summer. And I actually set a goal because I kind of knew how this was going to go. At the time, when the games were much smaller and I wasn't as good of a poker player, was I think I can get this 10,000 back by the end of the year. Looking at that now, it's obviously kind of laughable, but at the time, made sense. And sure enough, by November, I was able to get that 10,000 back. And it was a good feeling. Obviously not a great year, but a good feeling nonetheless. I remember in 2016, right when I had made a much needed career move from being a morning show producer, which was a nightmare of a job at the NBC affiliate here in Reno, which came right before I switched over to becoming a reporter at the ABC affiliate. But right after I got that job, I went on a massive downswing in poker. Talked about this over the years. When one thing in your life goes well, it certainly seems like often another part goes terribly. And it was basically the exact same thing, a $10,000 downswing. Now, I'm pretty sure I won that back earlier than November, but it was very similar in that regard. And then fast forward to the worst year that I've had since then, which was 2020. Now, part of that was because the casinos were closed for months, and I didn't get nearly as many hours in that year as I have in all the other years. But 2020 was a year where I was staring at a break-even year going into December. Now, I've talked about the fact that certain things were going incredibly well in those fall months of that year, and poker wasn't one of them. And then in December, both of those two things flipped. So I don't know if that answers that exact question, but it's the best answer that I got. Hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's great for the channel, and I genuinely appreciate it. And we'll see you back here next time.
Absolutely, Sean.
All right, Slick is here. Now,
Sure.
we got a trivia question of the day. All right, so the question, now this man enjoys himself a good meal at a fine restaurant. So the trivia question of the week is, in 2022, how much money on his credit card alone was spent at restaurants? Closest person in the comments that nails this gets a shout out on the next vlog.
I'm never gonna look back, cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast, and that's facts. Only I can make a change.